welcome to the December Kansas City Microsoft 365 user group meetup. We had talked about what to do, and when we planned out all of our months, we were getting to the end of the year, and we were discussing what do we want to talk about. And last year, I had been in a couple of panels to talk about some of the Ignite announcements, and we're like, oh, it's going to be right after Ignite, so that's fantastic. We can talk about all the cool stuff that's coming out. And Becky reached out to me and said, hey, I got all this Copilot demos I'd love to do. And I was like, hey, let's just do that. So the first half of this, I'm just going to go over some of the Ignite announcements that I think are interesting. I tried to really boil it down to things that I thought were relevant, and also maybe a few little extras in there, things that people are talking about, things I think are neat. And then for the second half, I'm going to hand it over, and Becky's going to give us a little Copilot demo. So that's super exciting. And I got a lot of people responding to this, and I think it's because we're going to have some pretty neat stuff on here that is brand new and not a lot of people even have access to, yet let alone get to see. So I'll let Becky introduce herself when we switch over, but about me, I do run Smarter Consulting. I've been in tech and specifically software development for almost 30 years at this point. I have kind of picked up a few letters along the way. So I do a lot of stuff with Microsoft. I'm a regional director, an MVP, and an MCT at this point. And we're also a Microsoft partner. So basically, at the end of the day, I spend most of my time helping people understand how to get more out of the Microsoft tools that they already own, or maybe get them if they don't have them. All right, so Ignite. Everybody's super excited about Ignite. Here's my really boring plain slide. Guess what? There was like over 100 announcements, so I, in no way, shape, or form, I'm going to talk about all of them. I couldn't even really fit, like I was trying to cram all the like really cool stuff on one slide, and this is kind of what I came up with. We're going to talk about each individually a little bit. But at the end of the day, there were so many things, and it was really nice to see it kind of cross different segments and different verticals, because a lot of times, Microsoft will really have a focus, and that's not a bad thing, but sometimes we feel like it's all this or all one other thing. And I really felt more this year that it was more like across the board. There was just things that kind of impacted every different area and every different product, which is why there's so many. And so I'm not going to deep dive too far into Copilot. We'll talk about that towards the end as I kind of hand that off to Becky. But needless to say, there were some additions and expansions that are going to come to Copilot. I know that's like, just a little piece of it. But there are a lot of things coming with Copilot. Teams has quite a few new things coming in as well. Basically, natural language search is coming, custom backgrounds is coming. You can even see it on your smartwatch. There's this thing called SharePoint Premium now I'll talk about here in a little bit. AI all over the place, right? We got Windows AI Studio. We've got some AI chip stuff going on. We've got some Azure AI stuff going on. Talked a little bit about the partnership with NVIDIA and what that means in terms of what's coming out in new tech. And then cybersecurity, there's a ton of AI stuff around cybersecurity. And then I kind of added this one little fun little neat thing on here, because Azure Cosmos DB for MongoDB vCore is kind of cool, just because now we can kind of take on that piece into the Azure Cosmos DB service. So I'll talk a little bit more about this stuff, but at a high level, I wanted to put it on one slide so you can see it. These are kind of like some of, in my opinion, some of the pretty neat things and high level things that have come out of Ignite in terms of announcements. I know this is shocking, but AI took center stage. In fact, Satya made several like very large statements around basically the things that Microsoft is doing in Copilot, and the idea that this isn't just about today. This is kind of like the next era of what's coming in technology. Is this kind of everything built on the back of AI foundationally, and Copilot is Microsoft's answer to this AI foundational element. Most importantly, the big thing to remember is that AI is transforming everything, every industry, every product. And so when I say it's reaching everywhere, it is literally reaching everywhere. The other thing that he talked a lot about was, the way that it's changing the way that we interact with software and the way that we interact with products. So, where maybe you had to be super tech savvy to do certain things before, the need to be tech savvy is drastically going down with AI, because AI will be that intermediary for you to be able to help you to do some of the stuff that maybe you don't know how to do. It will also make things easier and better. So when we think about like the breakthroughs in NLP and computer vision, um, the better that natural language processing gets and the more advanced that NLP stuff gets, the easier it is for people to interact with tech in a way that makes sense to them. And so we no longer have to think like a robot. We no longer have to think, in code or like a program. We can now think like human beings. We can speak like human beings. We can tell what we want in a natural language kind of way. And the software is beginning to understand that on the other side so that we can have more of a human conversation with it. In addition, this computer vision piece is the idea that basically, think about like ChatGPT and Dolly, right? The idea that now all of the sudden, not only are we doing this in code where first it was binary, then it was numbers, then it was written code with structured languages. And now we're able to interact with natural language processing and the world in reality. So as we input images and as we bring information in, we are then able to take that information in and interpret it in a way that we weren't able to do it before. One of the big things that came out of here that I did not put on my highlight board because I had it in here under AI is this Project Bonsai. And basically the idea of Bonsai, and when we start talking about Microsoft's autonomous system suite and all of the AI tools and AI suites that Microsoft is putting out, not only is the ability to do it out there, not only does it make our lives easier, but Microsoft is trying to be one of the first and one of the biggest in terms of creating the tools for people to be able to create the other tools. So think about it like Copilot Studio. So here's a platform, here's a tool that's going to allow you to create bots easily, quickly. And we think about Power Platform and how far Power Platform has come. It's these low code, no code solutions that are allowing people that are not developers to create solutions. And now Microsoft's taking that one step further and saying, we're going to give you low code, no code solutions to create AI-driven tools that you can then use internally, externally, whatever. So there's a lot of really neat things coming, not only in the tools, in the things that are in the tools, but also the platforms to be able to make new tools that are all based on AI. I don't know. I'm excited. I think it's cool. I think there's a lot of neat stuff coming. So kind of keep your eyes peeled for that. As far as cloud computing, so okay, we like the software, but there's more cool stuff too. When Azure Arc came out, I was really excited. Azure Arc and Azure Synapse, I think, were fantastic ideas. And it's really been nice to see them progress into really, usable products that people are starting to use, across multiple enterprise corporations. But the really neat thing is we're starting to see them expand these offerings. And so, for example, Azure Arc is now allowing them to extend their management capabilities to anything. So any infrastructure, it can go anywhere. And it's this idea of, and I've been saying this probably for the last 5 or 6 years, Microsoft has figured out they're not the only people on the planet. And with cloud technology, they have to play nice, right? And so they are starting to create solutions and tools that are saying, okay, look, we get it. We get it. You're using this other thing over here, or, you're using different pieces. Let's just figure it out so that you can work with us and whatever makes sense to you. So you're starting to see the cloud computing stuff change to, while, I mean, obviously in a perfect world, everything's integrated with its own software, but you're starting to see things where we're able to then go outside of maybe the Microsoft stack or outside of the prescribed track and be able to go out into different things, be able to pull those in. So the Azure stack, when we talk about this hyper-converged infrastructure, the really neat thing to this is that basically now we can use this to modernize applications in-house. And so this is back to that using anything, right? You're not stuck using just this or just this. You can now kind of pull it all together into one kind of bigger hybrid stack if you want to. Synapse is like this really, really neat thing in terms of being able to work with data, especially big data from an Azure perspective. And so not it's kind of, it's always been there, but it's really maturing and it's really kind of getting some good foundational legs underneath it. And the really neat thing is that, ultimately Azure Synapse is going to give you the ability to run big data at scale. And the stuff that's behind that, guys, is just insane. Like you look at the stuff that they're building behind it from an infrastructure perspective, and it's just amazing. And so Azure Synapse, while Azure Synapse itself is not new, the analytics tools and some of the more mature pieces of that product are rolling out, and they're just really kind of taking things to a whole nother level. They talked a little bit about IoT. I know sometimes like you think, okay, IoT is for like those people over there. I'm telling you, IoT is coming for you too. So you may not have really paid a lot of attention to like cloud computing and IoT in the past because you're like, well, we're productivity people. We care about apps, we care about software. I'm telling you now, this is all coming together. And so I normally don't talk a lot about like cloud computing and IoT stuff because in general, that's not in our wheelhouse per se, because we tend to stick to, like I said, we stick to productivity, we stick to process, we stick to apps. But at the end of the day, all this stuff is getting tied together. And so one of the things you have to realize is IoT adoption is like insane, right? It's this idea of everything's connected. Your devices are all connected. I mean, I could probably take a poll, and unless you are 100% adamant about not having any sort of assistant in your home, most of us have them. And if you don't have them in your home, you have them on one of your mobile devices, a tablet, a phone, some sort of thing. And what's happening is those devices are being used to make more and more decisions. Now, I get a lot of people telling me, well, I don't like them taking my data because then, blah, blah, blah. I'm nervous about this. But at the end of the day, there are a lot of good reasons to participate in those things. And if they're going to have your data anyways, might as well do good things with it. And so the idea behind the IoT adoption is really just understanding that that's a real thing. And there's a lot of new governing laws that are coming out around all of this to say, okay, what data can I take and what data can I use and how does consent work? And different countries are making a lot of regulations around this. Different states are making a lot of regulations around this. But just understanding that that's a real thing that we need to think about is it's really important. And the reason that it's important is because you need to understand what your customers are looking for. You need to understand what your clients are looking for. You need to understand what your users are looking for. And the two big things that Microsoft really talked about at Ignite is Azure IoT solutions, which once again, this is not brand new, but it is something that's matured over the years. And the idea is basically we're getting to the point that you can basically bring almost anything, any sort of hardware into Azure IoT. And the idea with that is if I want to be able to manage the phones for my employees, if I want to be able to, manage what they see, how they act, what does or does not go onto those devices, in the before times, right? Before cloud and before all this, we were real heavy on servers and maybe laptops. But now you've really got to start thinking about everything beyond that, because now we're getting into not just phones and tablets, but wearables. And as wearables persist, as wearables grow in the market, this IoT conversation gets louder and louder and louder because, we think about things like training and we think about things like productivity. And what you guys are going to see that's going to come, that's going to be a big deal out of this is when we have frontline workers. And the frontline workers in the past might have been lucky if they had a kiosk. Well, that whole world is changing with IoT. We're able to feed them information and get information from everything from mobile devices all the way to wearables now, which is, I think, going to change the way that we think about IoT and it's the way that it interacts with apps. Digital twins was announced a couple of years ago. Very, very new. And as somebody who has had to manage these types of departments in the past, where people come to me and go, well, how are we going to pay to test this? How are we going to pay to look at this? The digital twin idea is amazing because essentially it allows you to virtually, truly replicate real world environments and then be able to do your tabletop reads, to be able to do your security analysis, to be able to do your DR stuff. And so I'm excited to see all this new stuff that's coming to digital twins, because for anybody who in the past has had to put together a DR strategy or do a table read or try to analyze the architecture that you have, but you're doing it all hypothetically, that's very, very difficult because like you can't just take a production system and be like, hey, I'm just going to try this thing, right? We don't like to do that. So this Azure Digital Twins gives us the opportunity to basically say we're going to digitally, virtually duplicate this real world experience. And now we're going to do things with it and run scenarios and be able to understand what we need to do so that in our real world, we can make those changes and maybe not cause outages or, make sure we're secure, whatever it is that the point is that you're trying to use that digital twin for. So these are some of the exciting things I think when we think about in our space, which I consider that this user group productivity process type focused, I think this is way more important than people realize because I think it's coming for us for sure. Mm. All right. Copilot. There's a lot of stuff that's come for Copilot. And first and foremost, I just want you guys to know this. You will not see the term Bing chat anymore. You will only see the term Copilot. So when you see Copilot, be like, wait, is that the same Copilot that's in Office? Kinda. Microsoft is just trying to do some consistent naming across the board, but you will see Microsoft Copilot a lot of places, and it will be where you have seen Bing Chat in the past because Copilot will be replacing Bing Chat completely. But there's some new ones that they're expanding out to. So on top of the things that have already been announced, these are the new ones that they announced at Ignite. So we now have Copilot for Azure. And basically this is to help people with everything from troubleshooting to configuration. And for those of you admins out there, like, could you even imagine like what this is going to do for those poor, I'm the only admin in my place and I'm not sure what to do. It won't solve all their problems. It'll definitely give them a first kind of go-to. So they don't have to necessarily jump on the phone and ask somebody right away. They actually have a place they can start first and be like, hey, what's this problem? Can you help me with it? And obviously then they can escalate it out if they need to. But this is, I think, going to create a lot of support for some of those people who are working in Azure who aren't entirely sure and maybe they have some specific questions and they just want some help with it. Copilot and Dynamics 365. So I was kind of lucky enough to see some of the preview stuff for this, and it's super cool. And the whole idea is basically being able to build in guides aimed at, so remember I told you this IoT thing for frontline workers. So it's guides where basically you can put like SOPs and work guides and trainings so that frontline workers can have what they need at their fingertips. And you can use it on a laptop, on a mobile device, or for more fun, you can add it to mixed reality and give them a VR headset, and they can also be using it in that way as well. So there's some really neat things coming in that area for Copilot. Where they can basically say, hey, what's the next step? Or how do I do this? Or show me how to do this. So it's kind of overlapping a lot of things that have been out, but it's kind of putting them all together in a way that's super usable and super friendly. Copilot Studio used to be called Power Virtual Agents, which I've spoken on a few times. And basically, what they've done is they've taken Power Virtual Agents, they've added the AI under the hood, and now you can scope. So you can basically take those Power Virtual Agents, and now in Copilot Studio, you can create what's Copilots, previously known as PVAs. And you can go in there and you can create an AI assistant with basically no coding skills whatsoever. So you can go in there and you can basically say, I want to build a Copilot, and that Copilot needs to have access to something specific. So I built one called a Learn Buddy, and I connected it to Microsoft Learn. And so you can ask questions of it that are scoped to Microsoft Learn. When you think about things like healthcare or legal or things like that, one of the biggest concerns we have around AI is it getting the right information? Where is it getting information from? And so the really neat thing about building these copilots in Copilot Studio is that I can now scope them. So I can say, you're allowed to get your information from this, this, and this, and that's it. That's all that you're allowed to access. And then that way, when people are asking questions, we know that the answers they're getting back are information that we want them to have. And so I just think it's kind of a really neat thing. In addition, so they've got over 1,000 pre-built connectors to be able to connect out to different things. And that's part of, when you think about the Power Platform connectors that have been coming in. So now we've got all these cloud connectors to be able to connect out to existing data points that we may want to be able to scope for our copilots to be able to access. And so I think it's really nice because instead of just saying, oh, go look out on the web and get some information, we can define what that scope is and where that information is coming from and what we want to give back to our users. You still can do it manually. So you could still write, if they ask this question or say this word, I want to give this response. It does not have to be generative. You could use it as a hybrid approach. So you could say, I want generative, but I also, if they say this word or they ask this question, I want to manually give them this answer. So there's a nice hybrid approach in there too, where you can kind of do a little bit of both if you want to. So if you want your bots to only do certain things, you can still limit those actions to what you want to define for them. So Copilot Studio, a lot of it's just naming, but part of it is the ability to have that generative AI built into your copilots. And then Copilot for Service is this new idea of basically sales and customer service roles. So it's integrating with some of the major solution providers out there like Salesforce, Zendesk, and ServiceNow. And the idea of that is basically, if I'm already using ServiceNow to do things, I can kind of pop Copilot on the front and use Copilot to ask information. So for example, in ServiceNow, we have knowledge articles, and maybe I want to be like, I want to have an FAQ, but I don't want to have to somebody manually build an FAQ. I can pop Copilot on the front of that. I've now got Copilot for Service. People can ask questions of the service desk and get that information and pull it forward. So there's kind of some neat things coming with Copilot. All right, let's see. I think I got one more in here. All right, I know it's my productivity group, so we have to talk about productivity, right? So these are the biggest things that I came up with, and if I miss anything, feel free to pop them in the chat. But from Ignite, we talked about Copilot. We will talk about Copilot. Becky will show us Copilot. Copilot, Copilot, Copilot. Wait, if I say it 3 times, do I get some magical something that happens? So there's all kinds of neat things coming in the world of Copilot. But in Teams specifically, look at this list, guys. Like, it's crazy. You're going to be able to use it during, like, while we're on a call. You're going to be able to use Copilot in the middle of a call. You're going to be able to use it to write your chats. So maybe I'm not, sometimes I'm a bullet point person. If anybody knows me, I'm like, do this. And I don't mean it to be like not squishy, but like I'm just like my brain's bullet point, right? So maybe I want to fluff it up a little bit. And so I want to use Copilot chat to say, here's the message I want to send. And Copilot's like, oh, okay, let me take this bullet point and turn it into a message that actually sounds like a human is sending this. And so Copilot for chat will allow you to maybe communicate a little bit better, interact with people. It's also going to have some pre-canned prompts. I love the chat. We'll have some pre-canned prompts so that basically, like, if you're in chat and you need some stuff to talk about, like it'll have, it's kind of like autocomplete, right? I'm saying this, this is what you're trying to ask. Okay, cool. I'll just finish this for you. Search is going to get heightened to natural language search so that you don't have to like think like a robot to search for things. You can say, what time does this thing start? Or who is this person? Or how do I get this information? And Teams should be able to give it back to you. Copilot on the Calls app is a brand new app for Teams. that's going to be able to give you more generative information around your calls. There's some background stuff that's coming, so custom channel announcement background, and there's also some other background stuff that's going to be coming in Teams. Intelligent recaps. I don't know if anybody's seen the intelligent recap stuff yet, but it's pretty neat. Basically, it takes all of your calls and says, hey, here's who talked about what, here's what your bullet points are, here's your to-do list. It's kind of amazing. So that's rolling out. Same thing in notes, so collaborative notes. And then it's also going to roll out to whiteboard and meetings, so that, think about this. This is magic in my mind. Like, we're having this meeting and we're having a discussion and I'm like, throw out topics. And can you imagine Copilot throwing sticky notes on the whiteboard while we're talking? I think that's cool. So there's lots of neat things coming over there. There are definitely some background things that are rolling out around Teams that are not Copilot, just general, like you're gonna be able to build custom backgrounds. This decorate your background thing, I don't know if you guys have seen this, it's kind of super cool. So what happens is, like, it runs this like magic filter over your real background. So maybe you want to clean it up, maybe you want to have little sparkly lights, maybe you want to do something neat. The decorate your background kind of is like an AI background that takes your real background and kind of just makes it better. So you might Google that one because it's kind of neat. I was looking at it and I was like, this is kind of interesting. So it's kind of like SnapCam, right? Only for your bookshelves. I don't know why this is a big deal, but Teams on smartwatch. So if you are missing work and you're missing your employee or your coworkers and your employees and your clients and all that, and you just absolutely can't wait to look at another device, you can now pull up your smartwatch and respond on Teams. Sorry, I tried to do that with a straight face. That one cracks me up, because we need more access to Teams. SharePoint, on the other hand, here's the cool thing about SharePoint. The SharePoint team is bigger and badder than ever. They've come back. They're building a lot of new stuff in it. And so look at this gigantic list. Like, it was even bigger than, like, last time the SharePoint list was like this long and Teams was like this long. This time Teams is a little bit smaller. If I remove Copilot, it'd be like this big. But SharePoint's gigantic, right? So there's a ton of stuff coming in SharePoint. A lot of enhancements coming to maybe stuff that didn't already exist or is getting even better. So there's a lot of custom, like the custom background stuff in Teams. There's custom branding coming in SharePoint, better analytics. Here's hoping. Love to see better analytics in SharePoint out of the box. This integrated file viewer. So this has been coming in parts and pieces for years, but this integrated viewer to be able to see any file type once you click on it in the browser inside of SharePoint, that's exciting for me, because I don't know how many times I have to explain to people, well, you can click on it, but then you have to have the app and it has to open in the app, and people go nuts. So the integrated file viewer is really exciting. There's this new business doc apps and Teams that's going to integrate with SharePoint so that you can kind of manage your content in a better way. So legal documents, handbooks, guides, things like that. This AI-driven clause analyzer, people have been asking for this for, 100 years now? So if you're building contracts and you want it to generatively look through your clauses and help you build a contract, that's going to be built into SharePoint out of the box. Let's see, the e-sign stuff is getting a facelift. There's some new stuff coming out on there. Translation for files and stream videos. I did put pay-as-you-go because they did note that it is pay-as-you-go. So I'm guessing there's a transaction cost that goes with that. Let's see, AI-driven policy recommendations. So this is this idea of, like, as you're writing things and as you're putting things into your, like, think about, like, we don't want credit card information in our documents, right? So DLP has always been a thing, but it's going to be more AI-driven. So it's going to be able to let you know and alert you and tell you, hey, you can't do this. So there's some enhancements coming to that. SharePoint Advanced Management is getting content governance. Archive and backup are coming for SharePoint. That was something that had rolled out of Syntex. Speaking of Syntex, a lot of these Syntex features that have been since SharePoint Syntex, then Microsoft Syntex, are now just going to be SharePoint. And so there's some of this advanced document processing, content assembly, OCR, image processing, and taxonomy tagging, automatic taxonomy tagging. is all going to be coming in here. And a lot of this is all going to fall under SharePoint Premium. So make sure you're paying attention between the difference between SharePoint out of the box and SharePoint Premium, because a lot of these new features are going to come under SharePoint Premium. There are a few more things that are coming that Microsoft noted that are not quite there yet, but autofill columns, automatic detection of PII, the multi-label classifiers, and redaction, automatic redaction of things, as opposed to having to go through like the DLP redaction service to do it. It'll automatically do it inside of SharePoint. So all kinds of neat stuff coming to SharePoint and SharePoint Premium, but definitely keep up on what's new there. On all of my slides on the bottom, if you want to go back on the slides, anything that kind of caught your interest, the very first one has the Book of News link. So if you want to read more about everything that Microsoft rolled out, that's on the Book of News. And at the bottoms, I've tried to kind of put links to things that are relevant. So if you want to learn specifically about that topic, I tried to connect it back to that. So I want to make sure Becky has plenty of time. And I know there was a ton of information, but at least hopefully it'll give you guys, things to go read up on and go search. But that's what I think some of the coolest things that have come out of Ignite are. And I'm going to stop sharing, so it's all yours.
Thank you so much. That is hard to do, to end right at 12:30. Impressive. I was like, I don't know a single speaker, myself included, who can stop talking. So thank you. It's hard to do. That was a lot of content too. Very impressive. I actually had the opportunity to go to Ignite this year, which was kind of cool because I hadn't been there in like 5 years. I got to see Dan. We got to have a nice little evening at Ruth Chris for some drinks the first night, which is great. Unfortunately, I had the bad luck of coming down with a cold right before I went to the conference. So I didn't catch COVID from the conference, and it wasn't COVID at all, but I was just pretty much miserable the whole time, and I was probably the super spreader. So, it's one of those things where I took 5 different COVID tests. It was not COVID, but my nose was running, and you can't put a mask on when you have a runny nose. So I just was like, I've come all this way. So anyhow, I manned the Viva booth, which was pretty fun there at the conference. And that was interesting because I sort of do Viva a little bit. That probably wasn't the place I would have parked myself, but it was kind of neat to honestly learn a little bit more about it. So that being said, that was a great recap, Sharon. So what I'm going to talk about today is Copilot. And the reason obviously Copilot. I said it 3 times. But here's the deal, the super secret deal. By some stroke of luck, I managed to be part of I signed up at one point to say, I'll be part of these Teams SMB weekly call. And then they were like, hey, do you want to get a Copilot preview? And I was like, yes, I would. So I managed to get access to it like a month ago before everybody else, and which has been amazing. So I thought part of the fun of today is just the fact that I know that we've all heard a lot about Copilot, but not many of us have actually been able to see Copilot. So this is sort of, I'm going to breeze through the slide. We only have 30 minutes. This is sort of a whole hour presentation. If you saw my post on LinkedIn, I said it's sort of like, whose line is this anyway? We're going to go through and we're going to have shout outs, and you guys, we're going to build some decks, we're going to build some documents in front of you and talk about it. So I do want this to be interactive. When I first got it, I had my kids give me ideas. So they said, create a PowerPoint on why Star Wars is better than Harry Potter. And I was like, okay. Not great results, I'll be honest. But then my husband said, give a presentation on creating clean practices in industrial processing for pharmaceutical companies, and it actually came up a pretty good PowerPoint slide deck. So the big thing about CoPoint really now is that your mileage may vary, and we'll see it today. It varies all over the place. So it's amazing, but you really have to know the scenario you're going to use it. And if everybody's heard about prompt engineering, we are all going to become better at prompt engineering, because if you don't, you can just get completely crazy results. All right, so my name is Becky Bertram. I own Savvy Technical Solutions. When Sharon was in Kansas City, we were sort of on the opposite side of the state. She was in Kansas City, I'm in Illinois, with the great state of Missouri between us, although now she's in Florida, so, you know, a lot more space between us now. So that being said, like Sharon, I'm an MVP, have been one since looking at I have to start counting the rings on my little trophy since 2009, and also MCT, and sort of my claim to fame for myself, not to fame, nobody else cares, but I've passed a lot of exams. I actually like taking exams, and I really like writing exams. So I have passed 31 of them in addition to writing a couple for Microsoft. All right, so what is Copilot? This is an overview. Everybody's heard, I'm thinking on this call, it's rather obvious, but I really did want to jump in and just say that there was a lot of talk about large language models. And this was, I guess what I was a little confused coming into this cold was like, I've heard about ChatGPT, I've heard about DALL-E. I wasn't sure what an LLM was, a semantic index. Basically, ChatGPT is a large language model, but there are other large language models. And interestingly enough, they talked a lot about Facebook's large language model when we were at Ignite, and Facebook was even there, which really is surprising because you don't usually see Facebook at an Ignite conference. I think it was interesting. We were all sort of shocked when we were there, because the day Ignite was over, we found out that, you know, OpenAI's CEO got canned, and then, you know, a couple of days later he was uncanned. But that being said, there was sort of talk. I got the feeling, and again, this is complete conjecture, Microsoft knows it needs to not have all its eggs in one basket, because if there is something like a catastrophic security breach, that would be really, really, really bad with a capital B, right? So they sort of emphasize that OpenAI is not the only one, and there are other ones, and that kind of thing. So that being said, Copilot is leveraging these large language models in the back end, but you can actually create your own sort of plugins. So you can create your own Copilots as you will, if you're leveraging these LLMs. Something that kind of I feel very mixed feelings about in terms of just plain user adoption is there seemed to be, you know, I remember when Apple had theirs an app for that, and it was like, then they came out with Windows 10. No, not Windows 10, Windows 8, right? And they wanted everybody to build apps for that. They're like, everybody should build an app. And we were like, yeah, and even Satya was like, I don't use apps. Like nobody did that, right? Like we kind of use them now, but we still use good old desktop apps. And then with Teams came out, you should build an app. You should build an app for Teams. Yeah, but most of us just really use Teams for Teams, right? So at this Ignite, there was a real sort of overly ecstatic thought about creating your own large language models and things like that. And I'm like, none of us are going to do that. We're just not. They need some ISVs to get excited about it. And surely there's money to be made but for every, you know, one of those companies, there's a million of us that are not going to be building our own large language models or chatbots or whatever. So anyhow, that being said, topic today is really about using Copilot. The second thing that everybody may or may not be aware of, and Sharon talked about this, is there are many Copilots. So Copilot is really restricted to Excel Copilot, Word Copilot. And then you have some of these sort of meta Copilots, which are the security, Microsoft 365, GitHub. Well, even GitHub is sort of in-app. And so that was brought up in one of the comments that it was, the comments are sort of all over the place, but there's like 75 of, I can't remember what the number is, but there's an insane number. But it's kind of like how the Microsoft Graph is a unified API, but it talks to each of the apps in its own language, right? So Excel was just rewritten to be able to use Python, so Copilot has to work with Python, but Teams had been written in React or whatever, right? So anyhow, that being said, it's sort of the same way that each app has its Copilot. And so, for instance, I can't open up Copilot in Word and say, show me all the Word documents like this. The Copilot in Word only knows what's in this document. You have to go to Microsoft 365 Copilot to aggregate data. So anyhow, if that makes any sense. So the Copilots in each app are sort of about that document that you're doing there. And you have to have these sort of meta Copilots that can do the overall querying. So again, there's sort of some nuance there that is not immediately obvious. All right, so today I'm talking specifically about Microsoft 365 Copilot. The key here is that the Microsoft Graph is Microsoft's programming interface. And so what has made this possible is the fact that, again, if you're talking with Teams, you're looking at something written in React, and then SharePoint was something written C# ages ago. I don't know if it still is, but the point is this Graph API is able to talk to each of the platforms in whatever language the actual application was built in Microsoft's back end. And so now this large language model is on top of it, and that's what allows you to use English or French or Swahili to be able to interact with this. So us in America, we speak English. It's not such a big deal, but for people in other countries, it's really groundbreaking that they can use their own native language to be able to do things with APIs that are frankly written in English. The APIs are English, right? There's also a really cool presentation at Ignite at the beginning, how there is a guy that had muscular dystrophy or something like that, where I don't know if that was it specifically, but he can't use his body to type. And he said now he can talk and program through talking. So it's pretty neat from an accessibility standpoint, what we can do. All right, so the components of Copilot for Microsoft 365, there's the apps, the Copilot in the apps, like you said, where there's Word, Excel, PowerPoint, etc. Then there's Microsoft 365 Chat. That's where you can say, show me all the documents related to X, right? And as we said, it utilizes Microsoft Graph to access your own data. So that's why it, this is one of those many things why Copilot can leap ahead. Like so many inflection points, this wouldn't be here unless they had spent the last, 5 to 10 years building the Microsoft Graph that made it easily accessible. It's like that whole layer was already there and they just need to access it. And then the semantic index utilizes multiple large language models to interpret natural language. So that again goes back to, we hear about OpenAI, but it's not just OpenAI, but the semantic index just means language. How do we use language to talk about this? This is one of those many crazy, overwhelming graphics. The upshot of this is if we start at the top left, someone is in Word, PowerPoint, etc. They ask Copilot something. Essentially, it goes to the Microsoft Graph at the beginning just to say, what are we talking about again? And then it goes to the large language model and says, they asked this query in English. Please convert this query into more query-esque language, right? And then it goes back to, it returns an answer, and then it says, okay, what do you have access to again? Because we know the answer, but we don't think you're supposed to know that answer. So we're just going to make sure that this is ground. So they call that grounding. And that again goes back to any query you make in Microsoft 365 right now already honors all your security settings. So that's why people are all sort of scared of the security of this, and you do need to be circumspect about it. But the idea is, it's like if it's not secure with Copilot, it means it's not secure now in your search engine, right? So it's just the fact that, we'll talk about that in a minute, it's just so much easier to access stuff that's not secure. But really, when people are querying stuff within your environment, because it's using the Microsoft Graph, it is necessarily honoring those security restrictions. After it's figured out what the answer is, it goes back to the large language model to say, please convert the answer back into English, right? And then that's what it serves back. So the whole thing happens like 2 round trips, and it's basically like They asked this in English. We need to figure out what this is in programming ease. Go get the answer and then go back and give the answer back in English and serve it back. So your information is leaving the Microsoft environment long enough that that language processing can happen, but they are not using your information to train the model. That's the one thing I kept hearing over and over and over again at Ignite was we are not training the model with your data. So I'll be honest, if there was a breach with OpenAI or these other LLMs, it would be a problem because specific requests are, being sent out there. But that being said, it's not like those language models have carte blanche access to your whole environment. It would be really like these 100 queries left the environment. It just depends how much information was sort of embedded in those. So this is, again, security and privacy. Microsoft does not use your data to train the LLMs. It does store the user's query. This is interesting because at first, when I talked with somebody from the MTC here in St. Louis, he insisted it did not because that would violate privacy concerns. But in fact, for the reverse reason, for compliance, they do need to be able to track what was being queried and what the responses are, and that's part of Microsoft Purview. Now, again, in terms of your query leaving the tenant, besides the LLM processing, if you said compare, if you can actually turn a toggle on, if you're using like the M365 chat, which basically says, I am allowing my query to get web search results. So you're authorizing it to go out the internet and say, what other small businesses are like mine? And it will go do it, and I'll show you that. Okay, there are three primary uses of Copilot: generative AI, text and graphics, summarization, and querying. So generative AI text basically says, for each of these, Word, PowerPoint, Outlook, or Teams, you're going to go in and you're going to give it a prompt. This uses that ChatGPT-like generation, and we'll give a demo of that. Generative AI is using the DALL-E image generator. Right now, Microsoft Designer is only available for consumers, but it's sort of a foregone conclusion that eventually this will be baked into things like SharePoint, where you can go in and when you're creating a news article, you can actually create images on the fly. I mean, that I'm sure will happen. So right now, it's been fun. A lot of people, it was in preview before, and if you've been on LinkedIn lately, a lot of people are creating avatars with this, which is pretty fun. But anyhow, it's sort of a sign of things to come in the commercial sphere. So if we look at Microsoft Designer, anybody's looked at it here, this is again where you can start with a blank slate. I won't go into a lot of work here, but the Designer is in preview, but it's anybody can sign up for it essentially, but you have to use your consumer account. If you look here, I actually created a birthday invitation for my mother's 80th birthday using it this summer, and I was playing around with it. It came out and I actually used this and I sent it out in all my emails. So it really was kind of a cool little doodad, and essentially you come up with a design. Uh-oh. I made it a while ago. It might not be here, but anyhow, for the sake of time, I won't go a lot into this, but just say basically, if you start with an image, it's sort of like a PowerPoint Designer, where it gives you a couple ideas. If you don't like them, you can rethink them. And then they've kind of updated it to give you these prompts, which are kind of cool. All right, in terms of generative AI, so you can see here in PowerPoint, I've got the Copilot up. I can create a presentation. I can create a presentation from a file, or I can add a specific slide. So this is where I need the audience participation. What am I creating? PowerPoint for. It can be as crazy as you want it to be. Come off mute and say it so I can hear you, or you can type it. Help us from AI.
Yes. AI robot overlords.
Create a presentation about AI robot overlords and how they will take over the planet. Include 7 bullets on each slide. We'll see what happens. Big bucks, no whammies. I'm not able to do that. Oh, because maybe that's too dark. Now, this is interesting. Copilot will prevent you from doing anything it thinks is destructive. So, okay, we need something a little bit friendlier. Create a presentation about how AI will help humanity in the future. We'll do something positive. Now, notice that I'm doing something very bland. I found that in general, it'll come back with like 4 points per slide. And we haven't said anything about the look and feel, anything like that. So as you'll just see that this gets into the prompt engineering. Welcome to the future with a turtle. I don't know, there's a turtle. Revolutionizing healthcare. We've got 3 points. All right, AI is transforming healthcare. Its robots are assisting doctors and it can help identify diseases. Transforming transportation. We have a picture of a car. If you notice, 3 bullets on each slide. Revitalizing agriculture, enhancing education, and building a better future. That's pretty stinking good, I'll say. I mean, that's not bad, right?
Dan, we could have used this for our presentation on Friday.
I mean, it's fast. What you can also do is you can then say, you can go into your presentation and you can say, add a slide about the benefits of AI in what field? Manufacturing. Did we do that yet? I don't know. We'll see. So what you can do is not only create the whole slide deck, but then you can go in and you can choose to insert a slide about a certain topic.
So I have a quick question for you. You got me excited over here.
Okay.
Okay, when are they gonna at least roll this out, right? I can see, rolling this out for PowerPoint, even Outlook, Word, sooner than later. Like, is that the plan?
So right now they released it in a limited preview for companies that could sign up for a minimum 300 users for 1 year, which is over $100,000 investment, because this takes a lot of processing. I literally I told Dan this when we were at the MVP Summit in March, but I saw a posting for mini nuclear reactors to run their data centers. Like the amount of processing is insane. Plus, I think they, I won't lie, like I said it before, I think they are saying it's secure, but they are dependent on a third-party company for this. I think they are making sure that it's secure before they roll it out. It is a very intensive process. So right now, it's sort of weird. So it's technically already available. I mean, what I'm seeing in my tenant is real. It's there. But the problem is we just don't know when it's going to be available to everybody else. They have not announced that yet. So I'm going to go through and so then in Word, what's kind of fun is you can go in here and you can say, write a document about how to apply for healthcare benefits. So this is one of those things, even though what we did was a little bit silly, I mean, not really, but this is one of those things where I actually did have a client and she goes, well, I'm actually, it's the end of the year and having to write up my health benefits documentation. So it's actually going through and writing what are the healthcare benefits. It's now, obviously, this isn't pertinent to any one company, right? So it's going to be very vague. But then it is interesting how, I mean, it's grabbing it from Medicare, Medicaid, Obamacare, I think. But the point is if you have some really generic stuff, you can get a starting point from it, right? Now, if you've got keep it, if I do the regenerate, it's going to go in and be like, yep, we didn't like that. It's the same deal as if you went into PowerPoint and said, I want to try something else. All right. Creating a PowerPoint from a Word document. I mean, I think that's a good question. Let's see if we went in here. The interesting thing is if you, as you're doing these prompts, you can view prompt. So you can say create, about, ask for a slide about. So these different environments, they will actually give you some sort of prompt engineering, ask, how can Copilot help? I think there may be a way to create from a, now it says from a file. I think when you say from a file, it might be from a Word document. Yeah, copy and paste the link to the Word document you like to work with. So yeah, that'd be kind of cool. So after I've created my how to apply for healthcare, I could create a presentation about it. It's just kind of cool. All right, I am scooting along because, oh, here's the document. Now here's the other fun thing about it. You can say, make it a poem. This is one of those really fun and silly things, but you actually can go in and write your whole healthcare documentation as a poem. I mean, why not? If you can look at the second one it created, it was much longer, and you can even go in and say, make it 7 bullet points. If you need some help to pay for your health, there are some programs that you can use. They cover different costs and different services depending on your family, income, family, and health issues. Wow. The document will tell you about the options that are available in the United States. It will also help show you how to apply for them and give you some tips and resources to navigate. I mean, hey, why not? All right, so let's keep going again. I know I'm almost out of time, so I'm flying through this. All right, the next thing is summarization. Whatever. Okay. This is the thing where it can provide summaries, recaps of meeting, conversation, etc. And so this is where, if I can give an example of this. So for instance, if I go into my, this is my master services agreement. So say you're opening up a contract. And I get them, because I own the company, I have to do a lot of contract writing and everything for my contracts. This actually gives us a very concise bullet, considering it's a 12-page document. The fact that it can summarize it is pretty awesome here. So you just have summarized this doc, which is pretty neat. The other fun thing is if we go into our meeting that we're in right now, this is what Sharon was talking about. If I go into the Copilot of our current meeting, I can say, so this is what I did earlier today. I said, summarize the meeting up until now. But this was done at 12:14. So if I do it again, it's going to go and generate it real time. So this is what's really amazing. And what's pretty neat is we're spanning tenants, but if you're in the same tenant, it'll actually say, Becky said this, Sharon said that. You can actually say what were the tasks that were assigned. You can create planner tasks from it. And then you can actually say what was not discussed. And so I've actually had meetings where I said, hey, let's talk about that at our next meeting. Or, you know what, I don't know about that. I'll get an answer for you. And it won't just tell you what you talked about. It'll actually say what you didn't talk about or what you didn't get to, which are not necessarily follow-up tasks, but these are the topics we didn't get to. So it's pretty good. Participants joked about things in threes and the consequence of saying Copilot or getting it multiple times. So I mean, there you go. Now the key with this is you have to have transcription turned on. And it is possible to turn on transcription by default in the tenant. It's not on by default. So as I was trying to show you examples in my tenant, I wasn't able to do it because I actually don't remember to turn on transcription for half my meetings. So I need to go into my tenant and turn it on. You don't have to record a meeting, but you do have to have the transcript on. All right. Again, I'm flying through this, but I want to get through this. All right, querying. The last one is querying documents. Now, this is what we talked about, the grounding. It is possible to create your own copilots. So say you have third-party external data, you can use your copilot to access that external data. And this is where daisy chaining the Copilot Studio with Power Automate with external connectors with the Microsoft Search, you can sort of put these things all together and actually fairly easily query external data and have it come back in your own Copilot plugin, if you want to call it that. Now, as an example of this is where most people's security concerns come in. So besides the existential, is Microsoft going to use my data to train the models, which we know is a no, this is the real big issue. Until now, most people were concerned about data leading their tenant, but the biggest issue now is people are going, shoot, what about oversharing? So for instance, I went in and just for kicks and giggles, because I'm a woman-owned business, I have stored my profit and loss statements in Teams for submitting to the woman-owned business certification stuff. It's literally buried a document in a team. And I went in and I said, what was the gross revenue of Savvy Technical Solutions in 2022? And it gave me the answer. So, that's one of those things where it's like if you have documents that have been shared and people use the share with everyone in my organization link and they really meant to email one person, like you say, it's still, if that happened, if somebody were to type in the search engine the same question, they would actually get it back. It's just the fact that search engine is more readily accessible and, may not even be maliciously trying to find it. It just pulls it back. So this is an example where I have this M365 chat. So I was able to, you can go in there. If you look here, I was giving some examples. This talks about your mileage may vary with some of these. So I said, how many employee expense reports have been filed this year? It gave me examples. And then I said, how much has Becky Bertram been reimbursed? It did not do any math calculation. It just brought back more expense reports, right? And then I said, how does its gross profit compared to other small businesses in St. Louis? I thought, well, I asked about gross profit and it knows that. And it said, I can't do that. What companies are similar to Savvy Technical Solutions? Well, it brought back Commerce Bank, which to me was random. But then if you look at the reference, they're referencing a document called 21 Tech Companies in St. Louis. So this again gets back to just sort of the randomness in nature. That being said, there is something that's part of SharePoint Premium that Sharon mentioned. And this is where you can basically enable site restriction access for your organization. This is a paid edition, but the upshot of it is I don't care how many sharing links you created. This is for people in this team and this team only. Essentially, it says if this is the finance team, you ain't allowed to create links to anybody outside the team. You can create links all day long. If they're not in the team, they're not getting access. So this is a way of retroactively going back. Now, this is sort of a sledgehammer approach. You're basically saying, I don't care about your sharing links. Too bad. So this is one thing you probably wouldn't want to do all over the place. But if you're really worried about security, this is Microsoft's answer. This really is the short answer. The long answer is you take the time to go through and audit everything. But this is the sort of easy button, which will probably piss off a lot of people, but it'll work. Right? You go in and say that's it. All right. Whew. 103, not as good as Sharon, but there I am. That was a lot to cover in a half hour. I wish I had more time to give you guys more examples of this, but that's a slide about advanced management. Are there any questions anybody has, or if I'm willing to stick around a little bit longer if anybody wants to see more demos, but that's sort of Copilot in a nutshell.
I have one quick question. Any concerns about content, being duplicated? Even with the Chat GPT, I know I use it all the time. Always concerned about if I put in my questions and prompts and whatever, and someone else puts something in very similar, we got the same results. Has anyone ever experienced that? Not only with Copilot, but the other AI generator?
Yeah,
app.
somebody actually, this has been a big issue with universities because people are clearly using them to write term papers and stuff like that. And somebody did actually come up with a reverse engineered tool that was able to detect, you wrote this with ChatGPT, that kind of thing. Now, that being said, yes, they are going to have repetitive results. I mean, for a while, when I first started with this a month ago, every time I wrote an email, it basically wrote these weirdly, like, for business emails, it was almost like, dearest Sharon, I apologize that I will not be able to make your meeting. It was weird. It was very weird. So, and it kept doing it every time I said generate an email. So there definitely is repetition, and that's one reason why they are putting this into preview, is to get that feedback. So every time you do a prompt, it'll provide feedback. Now, you probably are going to get similar results because it's using the same large language model, and if you use very similar prompts, it is programming at the end of the day. But you'll see that little regeneration I did, that little regenerate. If you don't like it, you go to the next, you go to the next, you go to the next. The next thing that Microsoft is tracking is whether people, in terms of metrics, how many people are using the generated stuff as is and sending it. And they're actually measuring, are people becoming over-reliant on it? They actually want people, to tweak it and edit it. They don't want people to shoot it off as is. And so actually they'll be measuring it so that IT groups and stakeholders can be like, are the people in your organization becoming too reliant on this? If they, it's kind of like if you're in a self-driving car, you still need to, you shouldn't fall asleep at the wheel, generally speaking. So it's sort of that idea. So
with the
yes,
Copilot being Copilot, and I have to be careful. Copilot, ChatGPT, and even Grammarly has it. I always compare the three just to see, who comes up with the best, just out of curiosity. And so far, I think Grammarly is a little bit better than the other two.
And this goes back to the fact that like you said, are they rotating those? Can you regenerate? But they are using different large language models, and that's where, again, even though we're aware. I mean, if you're in a Microsoft tenant, you're probably both using the same models, so they'd be similar. The only reason they'd be different is if people have different access. So if somebody else queried my profit and loss statement, the only reason I got it is I have access to that team. If someone didn't have access to the team, they wouldn't get that result. So, yeah.
If I might break in just a moment there, I just wanted to note something. When it comes to output from a large language model, you are highly unlikely to get the same output from two different people for the same input, because that's
Really?
not how large language models work. Now, you may get sort of similar input output, and that's why a lot of these things that say, hey, we can tell you if ChatGPT has built your paper, they don't work, because they use neural networks, which is the way human beings work. So if you and I are asked the same question that is more than just a yes or no question, and we actually have to think about, go into our experience and pull something out, you and I may give similar answers, but we're not going to give the same answer. So you're not going to get that unless Microsoft is doing something to really throw serious guardrails, in which case I would question the usefulness of the model. But yeah, LLMs are non-deterministic models. So that is, it's not like a rules-based model where you throw in it's not like a math problem where I throw in the same input to a function and the same output comes through the output. It's entirely different the way it works. So sorry, I didn't want to.
No, thank you. That's really good feedback. I mean, I am new to this myself, and like you say, my focus has been really on the application of it. So yeah, thank you so much. That's good insight.